The topic for today's discussion is Sri Lanka in crisis, and how Sri Lanka is currently being targeted for Chinese enslavement as part of the 100-year war plan of Chinese domination of the world, and how India and the rest of the world can fight for Sri Lanka's freedom. Sri Lanka, which is a beautiful country, has been hit by hard times in the last 50 years, as it has been racked by an internal civil war which happened because of the wrong policies followed by the Sinhala majority government against the Tamil minority. This could have been avoided if good leadership had prevailed and allowed for mutual respect and coexistence. 6 things have led to the current situation: internal civil war, weak and a divided country asking for Chinese aids and arms, China practicing her long-term debt trap diplomacy against Sri Lanka, the takeover of the Hambantota port in a 99-year debt trap by China, the continued unviable investments by China in Sri Lanka as part of a debt trap diplomacy, and finally, abandonment by India after the killing of Rajiv Gandhi in 1991. Here is a timeline of events that have happened in Sri Lanka. In 1983, the start of Sri Lankan civil war. Between 1987 and 1990, the failure of the Indian peacekeeping force to resolve the civil war in Sri Lanka. 1995, China capitalizing on the withdrawal of India and the pariah state of Sri Lanka to supply Chinese arms and equipment. 2002 onwards, Chinese debt trap diplomacy against the Sri Lankans. 2018, new debt trap plan promoting Sri Lanka as the new Dubai. How can Sri Lanka think they can be the new Dubai based on a location? This is a Chinese debt trap plan 2.0. 2020, China's biological warfare on the world using the coronavirus, destroying the world economy as part of China's strategic plan to become a superpower. The Sri Lankan civil war was started because of the discrimination against the Tamil population. Another major event was Sinhala was made the state language instead of using English and considering Tamil as a second state language. Also, widespread discrimination against the Tamil population. The Indian initiative to provide peace to Sri Lanka failed miserably. India had intervened for multiple reasons, but without a clear strategic understanding of the strategic situation in the ground. India intervened for internal domestic purposes, to prevent separatist feeling among the Indian Tamil population in the neighboring Tamil Nadu state being influenced by what was happening in Sri Lanka. The second reason was to stabilize Sri Lanka and to prevent the genocide of the Tamil population, which was playing out negatively in the Indian Tamil media. India paid a significant price for her attempts to stabilize Sri Lanka. India had to suffer a humiliating withdrawal from Sri Lanka in the hands of the LTTE fighters who wanted an independent state and not live in peace and harmony with the Sinhala population. India had no good options available. The then Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, who had intervened to help Sri Lanka, was killed by the LTTE, which was paid by China as part of China's 100-year war plan to become a major superpower in the world and to keep India down and prevent her from becoming a thorn in China's back. China exploited the situation where Sri Lanka had become a pariah state by selling Chinese arms and equipment overtly and covertly to help Sri Lanka squash the Tamil tigers. China was the only country willing to provide weapons to Sri Lanka, had highly discounted prices to meet their agenda of enslaving Sri Lanka. As part of China's debt trap diplomacy and a strategic interest in acquiring a Sri Lankan port and putting Sri Lanka under a debt trap, she started lending money for projects that are unviable to entrap Sri Lanka, providing financial incentives to influential political decision makers and politicians to work for the benefit of the Chinese strategic plans. The takeover of Sri Lankan strategic assets like the Hambantota port and of critical infrastructures like the electrical grid, railway network, telecommunications and commercial property under Chinese subjugation. After the Hambantota port was shown as a colossal disaster and part of Chinese debt trap diplomacy, the new strategy being followed by China is to promote Sri Lanka as a new Dubai, which, despite her strategic position as a center between Europe and Asia, has been struggling to survive. Sri Lanka is nowhere in the strategic transportation hubs of the world, except as a critical stepping stone in Chinese strategic plans, which is why China has promoted this New Dubai concept to enslave Sri Lanka and put Sri Lanka so deep in debt that they are not able to get out of the debt trap being laid against them. What are the strategies that India and other friendly powers can follow to help Sri Lanka fight the Chinese debt trap and enslavement strategy? Rebuild the SETU bridge, which connected India to Sri Lanka till the 14th century. This distance between the two main points is less than 14 kilometers, with various islands available as stepping stones. Provide high-quality education opportunities to the Sri Lankan population. Allow people from Sri Lanka to work in India with a visa similar to an H-1B visa. Promote a reliable media to defend the people of Sri Lanka to have a voice in the decisions affecting them. The first step would be to rebuild the SETU bridge and the railway connection between Sri Lanka and India. The railway lines already exist close to Sri Lanka and Rameshwaram on Indian side. It would need only a 14-kilometer bridge and a railway connection to allow goods and services to travel between these two neighboring countries. Next thing would be to have an NAFTA-like free trade agreement with Sri Lanka, allowing goods and services to be sold tax-free or at a lower fixed tax amount between the two countries, as long as the products do not have any Chinese content or any Chinese interest in them, protecting industry and enterprise in Sri Lanka and promoting freedom of the Sri Lankan people. Allow visa-free work to Sri Lankan citizens. Sri Lanka has a lot of trained resources, but have very few opportunities or markets for their workers to be able to use their knowledge and experience. India should allow Sri Lankans to work in India in a visa-free like environment to benefit both India and Sri Lanka. Extend overseas citizens of India benefits to Sri Lankans to work and stay in India for long periods, allowing them to live as citizens of the Indian subcontinent. Allow the opening of Indian rupee bank accounts to Sri Lankan citizens and companies that prove no vested Chinese interests. Promote Sri Lanka to be part of the Indian subcontinent dream by allowing Indian stocks and bonds to be sold as long as certain security considerations are met. Promote educational opportunities for Sri Lankans. Allow Sri Lankans to come to India for higher education. Permit Sri Lankans to take the same exam that Indians take. Promote the starting of Indian university branches in Sri Lanka. Have the same fees that we have for Indian students for Sri Lankan students as well. Promote reliable media and freedom of the press. Promote the setup of TV stations and radio stations promoting freedom of the press. Also promote social harmony for Sri Lanka between the various groups so that divide and rule tactics being used against Sri Lanka are defeated. To conclude, we wish Sri Lanka to be free, prosperous and part of the Indian subcontinent, secure and free. And may she hold her head high as she deserves to be.